had an English Communications 12 class, and I had taught English Communications 12 last year and struggled with the quantity of assessment that I was collecting and felt that I wasn't connecting with the students on a level I wanted to when it came to reporting out what were they doing well. And that's always the key, because assessment isn't supposed to be about what don't you do, what haven't you done. It should be about what's the evidence, what can you do, what are you strong at, what are the things we need to work on, not what haven't you done. And we looked at moving away from a traditional grading system to moving to an outcomes-based system. So I took all the outcomes and I looked at them and I put them in student-friendly language and looked at what was I going to ask students to do to show me this skill, came up with some potential opportunities, met with the students, we talked about how this would be different from previous grading systems, and then we just jumped into doing the work. And very quickly I realized the huge benefits when it came to the students themselves. So meeting with students who were struggling, and instead of here's your 10% and here's the stack of stuff you have to do, instead the conversations were about, I don't have a lot of evidence, but what I do have is this, and this was really good, and this piece was really strong. And I watched students' shoulders go up, and I watched stress be relieved from them, and I watched students go and try again, and that was so powerful.
Instead of having the one opportunity and failing the assignment and thinking that I was a failure and was like obsessed over that, I was able to go, okay, I'll have another shot, let's look at what I can do better.
Almost view it as like a second chance to answer the question, but not in the way of being pressured to add it down on paper.
And I know for me, I'm a huge perfectionist, so being able to not feel that pressure was really helpful.
It was no longer about how many copies of the assignment did I get. It was about, did this task work with the students? Were they engaged? If they weren't, why not? What could I do differently to help them? Or what could I allow them to do differently to show this?
Everybody's capable, but then sometimes you just need to explain it in different ways compared to others. Some students may be able to write it out. Some students may be able to talk about it. Some kids cannot stand verbally explaining it, but then can write it down. And other students can't spell or even have a hard time writing. So the option of having multiple ways of doing it is what is the main thing that I find helpful.
It really took away the punitive nature of marking and assessment. And I don't think as a teacher my job is to punish kids. And quite often that's what a 0 does. Here's the punishment for not doing what I asked. I need to consider, why aren't you doing that? For most of my English Communications 12 students, English is not their favorite course. And it was just really exciting to see students positive and seeing students who were disengaged engage again in the classroom, students who were skipping, not skipping anymore.
I've really blossomed more socially because I do the same work as other kids, so I don't have kids making fun of me for doing different work. Because I knew in that class everybody had adaptations, so you didn't feel singled out because you did things in a different way.
In the real world, I'm not evaluated every single day. I don't get a grade on everything I do every day as a teacher. I look for feedback. If it isn't working for me, I change it. Well, that was what happened in my classroom. If it wasn't working, we changed it. That is the real world.
I believe that other students in Nova Scotia and even in the world should have a chance of learning in this way, because it is almost like a friend, almost. There's a consistent communication between the student and the teacher.
She doesn't just care about you getting your work done. She genuinely cares about how your day is going, what's going on in your life, and wanting to help.
They're at the end of 13 years. They really are in some ways the experts on what works for them and what's getting in their way. And they talked about the importance of having teachers who cared. So teachers who chatted with them and wanted to know about them. And moving to outcomes-based assessment allowed me to focus more on the student than the task.
It wasn't about just the work. She would ask me about how things outside school, how are things socially, right? And then she would see what she could do to help me in those ways also, instead of just, here's the work, do the work, pass it back.
If you had asked me 5 years ago, was I moving to outcomes-based assessment, I probably wouldn't have said absolutely. I was still stuck in thinking that it had to be a point, and it had to be this, and I had to be marking, and I had to always be giving a grade. Even at the beginning of doing this, that was a hard struggle. It was hard to get away from putting in my grade book 10 out of 10 or 7 out of 10. And when I finally was able to let that go, I know a lot better what my kids are capable of than any 8 out of 10 can ever tell you. They're not going to take away tests. They're not. They need to take away how to learn, and this gives them that power.